I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time today talking about the law. I've talked to some of y'all about some questions y'all have. First of all, it's great to be in the Tar Heel state of North Carolina. I grew up in Chapel Hill. Don't hold that against me. My wife is from Raleigh and went to Carolina. And Hank Ludington back there somewhere, Villanova guy, he and I always are talking about Carolina and Villanova. I lived in Chapel Hill during the Tar Heel Jordan years, so it was kind of a fun time. I've been telling people, have been asking what kind of practice we have. We have a national practice for CRPS, which is kind of unique. There aren't any other law firms that I know of that specialize in doing CRPS cases. But what we don't do is we don't do workers' comp and we don't do disability. And I've been telling people that when they ask me. Instead, what I do is I try to find lawyers for them. Think of us as a one-stop shop. If you're in North or South Carolina or in the Southeast or wherever you may be and you have any questions about a workers' comp lawyer, maybe a Social Security disability lawyer, something like that, please let me know. Shoot me an email. You can grab a card in those little tech wallets I have that Jim showed over on the table there. You can grab a card and shoot me an email and I'll try to set you up with a lawyer. But what we do is we go after the tortfeasors, the guys that cause the accidents that ultimately may lead to CRPS. As y'all know, complex regional pain syndrome is a foreseeable complication from any type of surgical procedure. We get consulted every year hundreds of potential medical malpractice cases, and we look at very few ultimately, because since it is a foreseeable complication, there's just not much we can do as far as going after the doctor. The only time that you could go after a doctor or a medical provider is if you had an unnecessary procedure, if it wasn't clinically indicated, if the doctor decided you needed surgery and the clinical objective evidence was that you did not. Those are very rare. The other type is if there's a botched procedure. And the example I give the most on that is a hand doctor who's doing like a carpal or a cubital tunnel release never ever should cut a nerve, but that happens. I've represented people in the past who've had their ulnar nerve cut during a cubital tunnel release procedure. It's almost a simultaneous nerve damage, obviously with the nerve being transected, and you develop CRPS. It can be developed very quickly within even a hospital stay. People complain when they wake up of just a burning pain, and it never goes away. But those are pretty rare as far as medical malpractice goes. But one thing we tell people, and I think it's really kind of therapeutic for them, is when they're first told that they have CRPS, they go look it up, because nobody knows what it is. Unless you've had it, you don't know what it is. And you Google it, and then you shut your iPad or shut your laptop because you don't ever want to see anything about it again. Then you open it back up and you look, and you go, well, gosh, maybe my doctor did something, because I had this surgery 6 months ago on my foot, and now, my limb's on fire, and I've got all these problems. Maybe I can go after my doctor. And so then they Google CRPS lawyer or RSD lawyer or something like that, and a lot of times that's how people get to us. But I tell them, I say, look, you can't go after your doctor, and since you can't go after your doctor, I would encourage you to take that anger and push it somewhere else. Push it towards your condition. Get really mad at what you have. Get mad at your pain and take control of it. And you can channel that anger and that frustration, not so much to your doctor. And hopefully your doctor relationship will be better at that point. You may be seeing a different doctor by then, but it's not anything that they did. They certainly didn't do anything to cause you to have CRPS that would be actionable. Now, we also represent the majority of our cases, or we represent people who get in accidents because trauma causes CRPS, whether it's a fracture or a sprain or a puncture wound. We represent people who get rear-ended, at a stoplight, and they get a herniated disc as a result, and they have surgery, and as a result of that surgery, they develop CRPS. Now, believe it or not, I was deposing an expert this week who tried to make the argument to me, logically speaking. It was a pain management doctor, where my client was in an accident, and as a result of the accident, had a a fractured hand, had surgery on the fractured hand, and developed CRPS as a result. So I said, doctor, isn't it true that as a result of my client's accident leading to the surgery that but for the accident she wouldn't have had to have, that she developed the CRPS, that therefore the accident was a cause of her CRPS? And the doctor said, well, I can't go there. The surgery caused it. I'm like, yeah, but the surgery wasn't going to happen unless she was in an accident that resulted in the fracture of her hand. He's like, you're right. I said, well, so doesn't causation flow then from the accident to the surgery to the CRPS? And he goes, well, you have a good point, but I disagree. I'm like, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to convince this guy at that point. But I want y'all to know, and I don't know what the situation everybody is, but if you are thinking about whether you need to hire a lawyer, if you've had an accident or a slip and fall or a trip and fall or some type of workplace injury that's not workers' comp, and you develop CRPS as a result of that, you may actually have an actual legal claim. All right. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about, and I've been listening carefully to all the presentations today, and this is like my fourth or fifth time to talk to different crowds of people at CRPS conferences. It strikes me that there is not one clear consensus treatment for CRPS. You get diagnosed with breast cancer or some type of other disease, and usually that's radiation or chemotherapy or something like that, and everybody pretty much knows what your protocol is. With CRPS, it's all over the board, and that's why they call it complex regional pain syndrome. There is no silver bullet, not for cure, but for treatment. I'm just curious because I've got 3 clients now all around the country who are early on, they want to go with the ketamine route. How many of y'all out there have used ketamine before? Well, that's a pretty big number because this expert I deposed also said that ketamine was being disfavored and that fewer people were using it. And he said, he's this guy, it's like physical therapy is all they need, and once they get past the pain, the therapy, they'll get mobile again and then they'll be fine. And I can't stand doctors like that because they're not compassionate and they don't understand. So the protocol that most of my clients use is the physical therapy initially, the sympathetic blocks, whether it's lower extremity or upper extremity, depending on, and then ultimately it might lead to trial for a spinal cord stimulator, and then ultimately, if that works, possibly a permanent spinal cord stimulator. That's certainly not, again, the standard protocol for everybody, but it tends to be with trauma that we see that more often for their treatment. I've also listened to the lightning process and what Phil was saying, and that's a really interesting concept because if you don't dwell on your pain and you don't talk about it, you don't think about it, then maybe you can overcome it, from a mind standpoint. But what I will say this, though, when you go to your doctors, you have to be honest with your doctors about the type of pain you're in. I know y'all have seen this, the McGill Pain Scale Index, right? So the McGill Pain Scale Index, CRPS is the number 1. It's higher than anything other on the scale, including childbirth and amputation. Most people don't know that. Doctors don't know that, right? So when you go to your doctor, make sure that they understand the level of pain that you're actually in, because otherwise they're not going to note it in their records. And that's, I can't tell you, unless you're in litigation, you probably have never pulled your medical chart to read your medical records. But boy, I tell you what, it is scary, because your doctors, by and large, are horrible documenters. You will tell them, that I've got a burning pain. My limb is sweating. I've got temperature changes. You can see the discoloration. It's swelling. You can tell them all of that, but they won't always record that. You just assume that they will, but they don't. And then if you're in litigation, it's really bad because then the defense expert says, well, your doctor didn't note that he observed all these things when you were at the exam, so it doesn't fit the Budapest criteria. And if we don't fit the Budapest criteria, then you must not have it. I'm sorry. That's not true. And I same old expert. I'm picking on him today, but he really pissed me off on Monday. I said, other than yourself, doctor, because he's like, I always write out Budapest criteria and each vasomotor, pseudomotor, all of that. I write that out, and then I check ones and all that kind of stuff. I said, well, have you looked at many medical records and you've reviewed thousands of cases? And have you seen that done in all those cases? No. Do doctors actually follow the criteria step by step? No. Do you think that the people that you're looking at probably have CRPS? Probably. So my point is, when you go to your doctor, if you feel like he's not or she's not accurately documenting your complaints of pain and what they're observing, because it's signs observed and signs, symptoms reported, then make sure they are. And if you're in litigation, really make sure they are, because you don't want it to come back to you. Those are my kind of initial thoughts on the areas of law. One thing that we're also seeing right now is a rash of needle stick CRPS cases, and they're also very difficult. But it's probably not going to happen to you because you already have CRPS or know someone who has CRPS, but I always tell people, if you're going in to get a blood draw or you're going in for anesthesia or something like that, and the phlebotomist or nurse or Red Cross, whoever it is, gets that needle and digs it in, and you can feel it going into your nerve or something like that, make sure they document it, because almost all those cases that we get a chance to review, they're like, well, they didn't complain of pain, and the potential client's like, we screamed. It was blood-curdling scream because she hit a nerve. Well, they don't document that. They don't document that because they're being defensive and they don't want to get sued. I get that, but if you talk to people, make sure that, if something like that happens, it's well documented. I would like to take, Jim, with your permission, maybe a couple questions. I know I've been talking to some people, but everybody hadn't had a chance, and we can maybe do a little quick Q&A. Sure. Yes, ma'am. Our justice system at work.
Finally got settled, but two things that really helped it, and the terms of the settlement were confidential.
Of course.
But it was not what I expected, especially after everybody got paid out of it.
Right.
At any rate, there was two things that helped it a lot were having the thermography done by Dr. Schwartz early on, like
Yes.
within a few months.
Yes. So you can see the temperature differentials. Very important.
And then Dr. Chopra's functional outlook,
Right.
current functional status and future functional outlook on it, like really were huge factors in the case.
Does everybody know who she's talking about? Dr. Chopra, up in Rhode Island at Brown University. He's one of the foremost experts in the country. I've consulted with him on a couple cases. But he's interesting because he is, and a couple of my clients now want to go see him because he is on the forefront of ketamine. He believes ketamine early, and that blocks are bad, and that spinal cord stimulators are even worse. So, there's a lot of options out there. It's not a one-size-fits all. It's whatever you get pain relief from is what you should go with.
The second part of my question is, okay, so God forbid, I'm out, and this almost happened the other day. Somebody almost hit me. So, because they try to bring up any accident.
Sure, pre-existing conditions, absolutely.
So pre-existing. So, what if you're in another accident and it makes your CRPS worse?
I've had those cases. You just make the claim that you were at one normal, and then this accident caused you to have a different new normal, and it was worse than the one before, and it just has to be documented. In theory, you would hope that your records indicate a lower level of pain and a better functionality prior to your next accident where it goes downhill. That's the way you would document that. But technically in the legal jargon, it's an aggravation of a pre-existing condition, and it's compensable in every state that I know of. Now, even though our office is in Dallas, we practice all over the country. We team up with other lawyers in different jurisdictions. One more question? Yes?
So, and I have a support group, and I encourage my members to have like a medical dossier, every doctor, medication,
Good.
symptoms, and I provide a copy of that to my physician, so if you ever have to go to trial, is that admissible? If the doctor doesn't note it, but you provide a copy?
Yeah, it would become part of the medical records, absolutely. And then, there might be some objections because it was created not by the doctor, but if it becomes part of the regular course of business of the doctor's office and becomes part of their chart, and they can testify that this is what I relied on when my client gave it to me so I could understand her medical history, it's absolutely admissible. And it's very helpful, by the way. Yeah, for any of you support group people out there who have others who are in litigation or you're trying to help, helping them summarize their medical records for their doctors is something that will go a long way towards a jury understanding exactly how the whole medical process flows. Okay, maybe one more. Sure. I don't know if we do. Jim, you want to listen to the question and just yell it to? Oh, I'm sorry. So her question was, she's has a support group and will help her people in support group summarize, puts their medical records together or summarizes them with the different doctors they've seen, and then the people then provide that to their doctors. Is that admissible in court? And my answer is absolutely, because it becomes a part of the medical record chart, and the doctor can testify that he relied or she relied on that record in order to understand the summary of the medical doctors and procedures that the client has had.